What's up, everyone? Andy Wood here. It's my first column with Guitar World magazine. We're going to be taking a look at some intervals and some interval introductions, kind of like the language and how I look at the fretboard of the guitar. I'm going to use the tune Believe off of my new record, Charisma. So make sure to grab the record, and that piece is a nice way to look at the fretboard because you have a droning note. Let's dive in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so the first thing I want to do in this introduction here is just lay out what it means to look at the guitar intervallically. I'll try to keep it short for some of you guys that already know this language, but I also want to go in depth enough for some of you guys who don't know what I'm talking about, or maybe you've seen a video, maybe on the jazz fusion side of things. You hear a guy going, "Oh yeah, this is the dominant seventh," or "This is the the sixth," or whatever, and you don't understand what that stuff means. I'm going to try to make it as simple as possible. So the first roadmap is using the open strings of the guitar as basically your cheat tool, right? So if you have E, A, D, G, E, B, E, then those are the starting points from back here behind the nut, right? So as you go up, there's really one simple rule to remember, which is there's two moments that there's a note that doesn't exist. Okay, so if we're going to say that you look at the musical Western music 12-note scale as a timeline, there's a note that lives in between every single note except the notes of B and C and E and F. So that means that essentially between, A and B, there's a note that lives there. And that note is B flat, right? Depending on your direction, your trajectory, the key that you're playing in, that could be considered a flat or a sharp. We're not going to try to get into those semantics because I want to try to do is simplify this. What it means is when you play a major scale, a lot of people would say there's 7 notes in the scale. My brain likes to think of it as an 8-note scale because, let's say, the key of D for the song Believe, we have a note that starts and ends. That note is D, right? That's the key. That's what that means. So you could really punish yourself by trying to memorize every single line on the fretboard, every note. That's very useful information. But linguistically, when I'm thinking about music as a language, that is one process that increases my workload in my mind when I'm trying to play. And I want to keep that workload as small as possible. So what I do is take any note that you're going to play in, the key, and make that note 1. Okay? So from there, we're going to play the major scale. So if you're going to play it in D, you're going to have this major scale. I don't like to have to worry about flats and sharps, right? So I want to eliminate the alphabetic perspective. I want to put it from alphabetic into numeric. So now we're going to take 1 of the major scale, and we're going to give every corresponding note, every interval in that scale, a number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then when we get to 8, 8 will be 1 again. So that's D, obviously. So instead of having to think of D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, D, I'm thinking of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. You might be asking yourself at this point, why is this useful? And the reason is, let's say somebody wants to play a song in the key of E flat. Heaven forbid, guitar players don't like to play there, right? So I don't have to change anything in my mind. It's still just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. Now I'm just in the key of E flat. So to learn the numerics is step 1. Just tie every major scale. This would go indefinitely, as if the guitar would run from one end of the universe to the other end of the universe. It would go indefinitely. And you can play it all on one string if you like. You can play play it in different octaves. You can spread it out. Basically, all of that is just taking it and learning and discovering more and more ways to play the major scale. From this point, it becomes very useful to understand the next level, which would be the triadic formula of making a major chord. That would just be the intervals of 1, 3, and 5. Okay, we can keep expanding on this. We can get into extensions. That'll be for things down the road. We can get into seventh chords. Again, things that come later. But the most important thing is not just learning this information from a cerebral standpoint and a memorization standpoint. You want to learn it from an ear standpoint. What does all this stuff sound like? That to me is the real language and the real beauty of music, is knowing, okay, here's what 1 sounds like. Here's what 2 sounds like with a reference point of 1 on the bottom. And I love that sound. I love that lifted sound of the 2 against the 1, or you could call it the 9. Because it wants to go up to 3, or it wants to go back to 1. So it's a really, really beautiful sound. Now you can hear what the 3 sounds like against it. 3 is really important because 3 is a chord tone. Arguably the most important, right? He's your colorful guy. He tells you if it's major or minor. So if I want to play D major, I'm going to play that 3rd as is. And listen to it against the 1. Notice that I'm not just doing this. I'm giving you that reference pitch. It's one of the best things about the guitar is you've got built-in bass notes, built-in bass players here. So let's listen to 2 against it. Here's 3. For argument's sake, if we wanted to play minor, we would simply move the 3rd down a half step. This would continue forever on the guitar. Major. Okay, now we can start to see how I formed the melody of Believe, and Believe was kind of inspired by that Brothers in Arms, Mark Knopfler. There was specifically the soundtrack to The Princess Bride. He did some music for it. It was really, really great. I'm a huge Mark Knopfler fan, and this was kind of like, has that same kind of, wistful, hopey kind of, hope-filled kind of vibe. Just sounds kind of happy to me. And a lot of that is based around how this 3rd sounds. Just really safe and at home. So now let's take a look at the melody of that verse of Believe. And this is a simple melody that you can really use to train your ear on what these intervals are going to sound like. Again, we're going to take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, and we're going to hear those against the root, right? So let's take the first part of it. The big payoff, let's work backwards. The big payoff is this major triad. And that tells us that we're home, and sonically the cadence has ended. At the front of it, we're starting with this 3rd against the root into a pull-off that drops down to 1. I'm going to do a little sidebar here saying that, a lot of my writing and a lot of my approach to the guitar is not in this block format where it's like play something, move it up a block, play the thing, move it. I'm into playing the guitar horizontally and seeing my intervals in a horizontal aspect, a lot like a slide player would. If I kept going, sorry. So if we kept the guitar going indefinitely, we're just playing on the G string and hearing that D on the bottom, and I think that gives it a much more musical quality. Let me play the melody without the single string. Here it is with the single string. Now if I play that, it sounds really not cool. To me at least, it just is a very sticky, like that's a very sticky sound. And I really love guys like Dwayne Allman and Derek and Sonny Landreth and Ry Cooder and guys that have this very liquidy kind of sound. And a lot of that's just based by the nature that they're treating the guitar as a horizontal instrument, not something that's meant to be memorized and chunked and taken apart. So when we take the top of the melody, even though it is very simple, it has this lush sound because you're hearing so much of the guitar kind of strumming. If you have a kickstand on your guitar, you can give the chord a wiggle and you're off to the races. Now, part 2 of this, let's say you dissect the head and you see what a 3 sounds like against a 1, and a 4 sounds like against a 1, and a 5. There's that nice resolution. What's it going to sound like when I play a chord in this key that is not the key of D? Let's use the 4 chord. So use your alphabet, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's going to be G. The 4 chord is going to be G. Now, when I play G, you can look at it in a couple of different ways. One of which could be a G that's going to have a sharp 4, which is factual. That indeed is happening. You have that sound that's got that sharp 4. But if you take away the bass note, it's still just the D major scale. So you're still seeing just the intervals of D. Look at my hand. Here's 1. Here's 7, 6, 5, 4. I'm going to put my thumb on to represent the G note that's happening in the bass. Now that 4 sounds like a 4 chord, and that 5 has this suspended sound, and I'm just playing the notes from the D major scale against this G root. That is what happens on the back of the verse of Believe. So now, as you're studying your intervals, you can use this G chord, which is the 4 chord, look at it as its own roadmap, or you could see it from the perspective of the D major scale against a G. So it's like a D over G kind of thing. There's a lot of different ways to do this stuff. And I want to clarify that. There's no right or wrong way when it gets into the deep thralls of music theory. And if you don't believe me, simply debate Leonard Skinner's Sweet Home Alabama. Is that 1 flat 7 4 or is that 5 4 1? That's up to you guys to battle it out there in the world. But for me, just being able to see the flow and the interlockings of these scales from a numeric standpoint not only makes it accessible in the key of D, but it's accessible in other keys instantly. So pretend we've played the first part, and now let's go to the 4 chord. So we're going to play G. I'm going to play the root here so you can hear it. So one more time. One thing to keep on top of all of this, maybe the most important thing of the whole lesson here, the information of scales and harmony is one parameter. That doesn't make it music. The most musical thing you can do is add ornamentation to this stuff to get it to sound like music. Put ornaments on the top of it. Play things in an interesting way. Now, if you look at the back half of this verse, I could play it very simple like that. That doesn't have a rich musicality like playing it this way does. I'm letting these notes ring out as I play the melody like that, so I get that really rich, that lifted kind of sound. Instead of just playing things blocky versus. Now I'm going to readdress that theme and slide in from the string. Look how much I'm playing on just the G string. And that's treating a nice resolution to landing on that fifth. It kind of lets us know that the verse isn't over yet, and we're going to repeat the verse, and then we'll go into the chorus. So just to review, step 1, learn your intervals by using the major scale, and the key is the bass. Step 2, start looking at the guitar elongated, not just playing your intervals in a block like this, but playing them all the way up the neck and understanding that from root to third to fifth is actually a lot of neck. Look how much neck that is, okay? That's step 2. Step 3 is using other chords in that key. Again, we were using the G chord as the 4 chord against the key of D. That means we could use the D major scale against that G, and it's going to change it. Instead of just sounding simple, it's going to have this sound. Because we're using that major 7 from D. That's going to give us the lifted 4 sound in the key of G. This is all the building blocks for me and how I like to approach the guitar, and I think it's most beneficial to kind of understand this basic formula of perspective more than it is anything else. It's just a perspective of the fretboard, and I think it'll help you unlock things that you're wanting to learn. I also think, and it's really a big one, it kind of triples down how accessible the things you've already learned are. So let's say you've learned a bunch of stuff just from tabs and you only know it in that one position. Well, if you transfer that information into intervallic knowledge using what I've told you, now you can play that stuff in any key that you want to, and everything kind of becomes available all the time. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on that, and I hope that this sheds some light on the perspective of intervals and how we're going to move forward in these columns.